Here we are then. There is slim to no chance that I'm going to finish another book before the end of the month, so we're doing an early reading wrap-up. November was a marvellous month for me. Every book that I read I enjoyed. I think I got through 5 books, 4 books, I don't know. Who cares? I don't really count numbers. I just put them on my Fable, and then at the end of the month I discuss them with you. I read 1 crime/thriller, and I believe the rest of the books were fantasy. I'm also going to talk to you in this book about why I have decided to upgrade, side grade, whatever you want to call it, but I've decided to leave Amazon behind and stop using my Kindle Paperwhite and pick up the Rakuten Kobo Libra Color. So I'm going to talk to you about why I've decided to make that choice. One of the reasons that I've decided to do that is because I want to personally try and lean more towards e-reading rather than physical books. Nothing will ever replace physical books for me. The nostalgia, the feel of a book in my hand, the smell of a book in my hand. I'm a weirdo. I am very sensory. I like to feel and smell and touch things. But I just don't have enough room in the house. I've got that, basically that space that you can see behind me there with the doors is full of 2 bookshelves, and I don't have any more space to put books. So I'm going to try leaning a bit more on e-readers, and I just think that the Kobo Libra Color will just add an extra dimension that the Paperwhite didn't, and hopefully stop me from constantly buying books from charity shops and just create a bit more space in the house. Right, let's get straight into what I read in November, because there's quite a bit I want to talk to you about in this video. So I started off November finishing it off Savage Run by CJ Box, which is book 2 in the Joe Pickett series. I've spoke about it before, really enjoyed it. It just makes me feel like a cowboy. It makes me want to grab some leather jacket, leather boots, my little cowboy hat, and yeehaw listening to Chris Stapleton. I'm not even American. I don't think you need to be American to love the atmosphere that book creates. It very much creates a Western kind of feeling, set in the hills in Wyoming in America. It was absolutely marvellous, and a series that I'm buzzing to continue reading. I highly recommend it. If you're into mysteries or police procedurals, if you fancy something a bit different, just give it a go. Give book 1 a go and see what you think. They're all on Kindle Unlimited, at least they are in England. If I recommend them, no, I'm telling you they're good. I wouldn't tell you they were good if they were crap. Just read them, really good. After that, I then went into book 2 of the Song of Ice and Fire, Clash of Kings by George R.R. Martin. I really enjoyed it. I'd say I enjoyed it as much as book 1. I just find that series to be a little bit overwhelming for my brain. I've got a really bad memory. I don't retain information really well. Thankfully, I had Macaulay Buddy reading it with me to hold my hand, so if I did get confused about anything, I'd just send him a voice note and he'd message me back and be like, no dude, I think you're confused. This is who that is. This is where they are. And I'd be like, okay, cool. Kind of like light switch moment, which is why I highly recommend buddy reads, especially when you're doing like epic fantasy, because sometimes your buddy or buddies will pick up things that maybe you've missed out on, and it just adds that extra dimension to reading. So I really enjoyed that. I'm going to continue with the series. I don't have the physical book to show you because, again, I'm having storage issues at the minute, so I ended up taking that along with, I think, about another 15 books to my local library. Thankfully, my library do accept books. I know that other people's libraries are a bit particular with what they take. I live in Chesterfield, so if you do live in Chesterfield, Newbold Library are so grateful to receive any books. Obviously, the books have to be in some sort of readable condition. They can't be absolutely smashed to bits and annotated. But if you've got books that are in good nick and you don't want to take them to charity, pass them on to your library, because a lot of people rely on libraries just to be able to read. You know, they're such an important part of the community, and if we don't use them, we're going to lose them. So please donate to your library if they accept books. After I'd finished reading Game of Thrones, I then went into Stephen King. I've not had the best of experiences with Stephen King, as some of you know, so I wanted to pick up something different, something that wasn't one of his horror books, and I ended up picking up Mr. Mercedes, which is part of the Bill Hodges trilogy. This is book 1, and it was absolutely fantastic. I rated it, I think, 4.5 stars. Just everything I wanted from Stephen King that I'd never been kind of given before was in this book. It was fast-paced, there was really good characters, the serial killer that it follows is absolutely mental, and Bill Hodges, the main character, was just such a likeable dude. It starts off this book with a retired detective called Bill Hodges, who sat at home, really suffering with his mental health, doesn't understand kind of where he belongs in life. He feels like he's got no self-worth because his life was his work. And now that he's retired and he doesn't have kind of family to fall back on and things like that, he's kind of like, what's the point in being here? Maybe I just shouldn't be. And then he gets taunted by the Mercedes killer, who is basically a guy who drove a Mercedes into a group of people and never got caught. Killed them all, mass serial killer. And it was like the failure in Bill Hodges' career. It was like the thing that tarnished his career. And this dude just messages him and he's like, haha, Bill, you didn't get me. Unlucky pal. I'm living my best life. What are you going to do about it? So Bill's like, I'm going to catch you. But he doesn't tell his mates from police force. He's like, I'm going to do it on my own. So then en route, he meets unlikely friends in a young lad called Jerome and a young lass called Holly Gibney, who I believe plays a bigger role in some later Stephen King works. And I just thought it was absolutely brilliant. The unlikely friendship, the seeking of kind of worth for Bill Hodges throughout the story. You can see that he's almost finding that spark back in his life. I loved Holly Gibney as a character. She was just so kind of unique and funny without intentionally being funny. And then Jerome as well. I just loved his story and his relationship with Bill. I just thought, again, it was just such an unlikely friendship, but one that worked. And I'm really excited to carry on with this series. It maybe taught me that maybe Stephen King's horror works just aren't for me, and maybe I'm not much of a horror reader, and his other works in like the kind of crime / police procedural and general fiction might be more at my street. So I'm going to continue with my Stephen King journey. A lot of people in the past told me to give up on Stephen King. They said, maybe he's not for you. Not every author's for everyone. And I'm glad I continued, because had I not continued, I wouldn't have found the Mr. Mercedes book, and I'm really happy that I did. After I'd finished reading Mr. Mercedes, I then fancied some fantasy again. So I decided to pick up Empire of the Vampire, because I kept seeing everyone and the cat's mother on my pages, on my different social media accounts, can't even speak, posting the finale to this series, which is called Empire of the Dawn. And it reminded me that I needed to pick up this series again, but I wanted to do a reread of book one, because I kind of forgot what happened. I read it about a year and a half ago when I was really struggling with my mental health, and I didn't really retain much information. What this book has taught me was that I was reading too fast. About a year ago, I was probably getting through about 10 books a month, and now I'm probably reading, I don't know, I think this month I've read completed 4 books. But the enjoyment that I'm getting from each book is just tenfold compared to what I was getting a year ago. The amount of information that I'm retaining now compared to then is just chalk and cheese. And I think it's just taught me one thing, that I need to stop trying to keep up with other content creators who are reading 10 to 20 books a month just for the sake of being able to talk about 10 to 20 books, and just read for joy, because that's why I started reading. And I think sometimes you can get lost in the sea of quantity rather than quality. So this month I've really slowed down my reading. I've been reading a few chapters a night. Sometimes I'll read for an hour or two, but I'm kind of reading just when I feel like it, not reading because I feel like I have to. And that led me to enjoying Empire of the Vampire so much more than I remember last time. The joy that this book gave me was just unparalleled. It is already going to be in my top 3 fantasy series of all times. I find it hard to rank fantasy series because I'm very much a mood reader. So at the minute, this is like, whoa, this is the best fantasy book ever. But I'm in the moment, and I think sometimes when you're in the moment, it's easy to be like, this is the best thing I've ever read, because you kind of forget how a certain book made you feel at the time. But it's definitely going to be one of the best fantasy series that I've ever read. I know I've spoke about this before, but I'm going to keep gushing about it. It's about a character called Gabriel de Leon, who is a half vampire slayer, who is telling his story about how he went on to kill the most powerful vampire that there ever was in an interrogation. So pretty much the entire book is written in dialogue. It's an absolutely wild concept, but one that just really works. And now that I am halfway through Empire of the Damned, which is book 2, it's just making me love this world and these characters even more. The entire of the first book gives you kind of the early years of Gabriel de Leon and how he became part of this order that goes around hunting vampires. You learn about some friendships that he builds earlier on in his life, and there are some time jumps to later on in his life, and then at the end of book one, it's a nice merging of these time jumps that kind of brings you to, not current day, but close to current day. And then right at the end of book one, there's just a batshit crazy moment that happens where you're just kind of like, whoa, what's going to happen in book two? Like, how are they going to narrate this story now in book two? And then book two just was perfect. The start of book two was perfect for me. It gave me everything I wanted, everything I was worried that I was going to lose, I didn't. And then it continued with the story, which is just marvellous. I'm very much, when it comes to fantasy stories, I enjoy quests. I'm not massive on politics. I don't necessarily need a lot of political intrigue. And I think for people that get put off by heavy politics in books, this book will be perfect for you, because the politics are very, 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 very limited, if not non-existent. And it very much is a story about a morally questionable man on a quest, meeting some people that help him become a better person en route. You can't help but love Gabriel de Leon. But some of the characters that you meet en route, who are also very morally questionable, you also can't help but love. There is a character, if you've read this series, I'm going to try and do this without giving any spoilers, there is a character that you are introduced to who is very close to Gabriel de Leon, who you can't help but dislike and despise until you are introduced to them later on. The way that this story has my mind so divided is like nothing else I've ever read before. The enemy of Gabriel de Leon throughout this story, or at least for the back half of book one and in book two, the enemy of Gabriel de Leon in this story is given an opportunity to tell their story later on in this story. And it was just such a clever concept, and the way that the author kind of reminds you that there are always two sides to a story and not to always believe a single narrative. It was just so clever. And I'm now kind of constantly, as I'm reading this, questioning myself, thinking like, how can I like both of these characters? How is it that they're both telling me two different stories and I'm kind of rooting for both of them? It's also a really clever take on how, you know, the upbringing of a child can affect their actions, and how two people can be raised by the same parents but have very, very different outcomes in life. It's remarkable. Really, really good. I'm only like a third of the way through Empire of the Damned, and I'm just taking my time with it intentionally because I don't want this series to end. Once I've finished Empire of the Damned, I'm then going to go straight into Empire of the Dawn, which is unheard of for me. I never read book one in a series and then dive straight into book two and then straight into book three. But this book is just doing that to me. There's no place I'd rather be. There's no place I'd rather be. Singing's not my thing. I love singing, but I'm just suck dog's ass at singing. So that's my plan for the rest of this month going into next month. And then next month's priorities really are going to be, my main priority at the minute is to not keep continuing like book ones in series and then forgetting to come back to them. I want to start completing series before I move on to the next one. So I thought, right, well, what series do I want to read next then? And I think I've decided that I'm going to start the Reria Revolutions series by Michael J. Sullivan, book one being The Theft of Swords. This book just has me intrigued. I went onto Google and I just typed in, I want some happy fantasy recommendations where there is hope. Because a lot of the books that I read at the minute seem to be in quite dark worlds, grim worlds that just seem to lack hope. And I wanted something a little bit happier, something that could make me smile, something that made me feel like, you know, the Lies of Lot Lamora, where you're not always worrying about everyone just dying. And this came up highly recommended. What I do like about this is before this was picked up by a publisher, the author had fully completed this as 6 individual books. And then once it got published, they were put into 3 books and, you know, 2 books were put into 1. If that makes any sense. I know what I'm trying to say to you. Hopefully you do. So this is book 1, which includes 2 of the 6 books. And I'm told that this follows 2 characters called Royce and Hadrian, who are just 2 of the most likeable characters in fantasy. One of them is a thief and one of them is a mercenary. they make the profit basically living as agents and working for wealthy nobles, but then I think they get stitched up and they're used as like scapegoats in a plot to murder the king. So it's going to follow them. I'm really excited to read these. I've only got this book so far, but if I enjoy this, I'll then continue with the next book and the next book. So excited to see where that goes. And then I didn't want to commit to any more fantasy series because obviously I've got a problem. So I believe this could all change. My mind changes daily. I Am Legend by Richard Matheson is a book that I'm intrigued about because it's only 159 pages long, and a lot of people say that this is one of the better of his works, and I'm always intrigued to see how an author can make a book good in so little words. I haven't seen the film, but I am told that the book and the film do differ, so I'm excited to see what all the kind of fuss is about with this book. And then I was going to read the other book by Christopher Buehlman, which I think is called, I don't even know what it's called. It's red and it's about the plague. I was going to read that book, but then a few people messaged me and said that this book's actually better. So I'm going to go for this book first. Not that I'm like against starting off with worse works and then building up, but because it's a new author, what I don't want is to go into a book that I might not enjoy and then that put me off reading any more works by this author. So I'm going to read this, The Black Tongue Thief, which I have no idea what it's about. Someone recommended it to me, so I was just like, all right, cool, I trust your recommendations. I'll get it. So I've got it. So that's about all I think I will get through in December. If I read through them, because some of them are shorter books, then I'll decide at a later date. There's a few books on my shelf that I'm really keen to get on with. One of them is The Raven Scholar by, I think her name's Antonia Hodgson, but again, I think that's part of a series, so I don't really want to commit to any more series. And another book is King Sorrow by Joe Hill, but that's like a mammoth of a book, 1,000 pages. That'd probably take me a couple of weeks to read. So, right, now that you know what I've read and what I plan on reading next month, I'm going to talk to you about why I changed from this to this. I will start by saying I bloody loved my Kindle Paperwhite. It did everything that I wanted it to do. It's comfortable, it's efficient, it's fast, it's perfect for laying in bed at night. I am an habitual book reader, a fall to sleeper, and I end up falling asleep with a book in my hand. It smacks me on the face. I don't want to do it. So I got my Kindle. I can lay on my side. It's a bit easier to read. And if I do fall asleep, I drop my Kindle on the floor. It's not end of world. And it's got a cover on, so it's kind of protected. And you can put these little things in back that make it look pretty, but they're back to front because I took it off yesterday to compare the size of these two. Anyway, I digress. Kindle itself was really, really good. The only thing that it was lacking for me is when I'm reading physical books, I do like to annotate from time to time because I've got a bad memory. So if there are any passages that I think I might want to or need to come back to, I'll just underline them and then I'll dog-ear the page so I know at a later date, right, I've dog-eared that page, I can come back and then I'll read it and I'll go, oh yeah, I wanted that as a reminder for later on. With the Kindle, you can do that. So on the Kindle, let me show you. If you've not read on Kindle before, you can highlight and then you can drag a passage and it highlights it like that. And then at the top, it'll say note. So if I click into note, I can then add notes in there and then come back at a later date. And that passage at the bottom of it, I'll have a thing to say that there's a note and I can go in and I can look at it. But as somebody that's not the quickest of readers, that just takes up more time as it is. And when I'm trying to put content out there, I already struggle to read and enjoy at the same time. And with what I said earlier in the video about trying to slow down my reading so I can enjoy it more, it's already going to be difficult enough for me to talk about a lot of books. So I wanted something that would hopefully speed up the process a little bit. So I went online and I just basically typed in what's the best e-reader for annotating books. And the Kobo Libra Color was the one that kind of came up at the top of everyone's list. Now, this is not gifted to me. This is completely non-biased. It's not sponsored, anything like that. If I've got any issues with this product now and in future, I'm going to tell you about it. Initial impressions when I first opened this yesterday, because it came through the post yesterday, was it felt better in my hands. Now I'm 6'1", I've got size 12 feet and my hands are proportionate to my body. So I would say that my hands are probably slightly above average, which a bigger device is always going to feel a bit better. This Kindle Paperwhite did feel a little bit smaller in my hands than I wanted it to, but I do believe there might be a bigger Paperwhite than this one. This is just a regular Paperwhite. I think it's like 130 something quid. This feels more comfortable in hand. I also like the inclusion on this of buttons. So at the side of this, you get these two buttons at the side, which naturally for me, when I hold this, I hold it like this, and I can press this bottom button here, and it swaps page, and it swaps it relatively quickly. I wouldn't say there's any difference in speed between how my Kindle changes page. So if I press on there, if anything, I would say the Kindle might be a little bit quicker, more responsive when it comes to page turning, but it's not slow to the point where it annoys you. It literally is like less than a second to change a page, which is less than the amount of time it would take me to change it physically. But the screen itself on this was bigger. So the screen on the Kobo is slightly bigger, which I actually prefer. You can also adjust on the Kobo your margins. So if you want the words to go kind of closer to the edge of the page, you can adjust it like you can on the Kindle just by pinching the screen and zooming out and in. That'll make the fonts bigger and smaller. There's a lot of adjustability when it comes to fonts as well. I would say more so actually on the Kobo than the Kindle. But the game changer for me was the stylus. Now I will say this is not a cheap product. It cost £179 for the actual Kobo, which was on offer. I think it was a Black Friday offer. I got the case that comes on it here, which is just like a flappy case that you can bend this bit here and use it as like a stand. I think the case was like £25, but this chuffing pen, this stupid stylus here, was like 75 quid, £70, something like that. It was ridiculous, so expensive. I am told from looking on Reddit that if you're going to get one of these, you can use other stylus that do work, but you just have to do your research to find out how to get them to work. I am very anal when it comes to trying out new products. If I try a new product, I want to make sure that everything matches so I know that it works properly. Once I trust the product, I might kind of change things a little bit, but I wanted to do it properly. So the reason I got this stylus and the reason I wanted to get this product was because, hopefully you can see this, with this stylus you can annotate. So you can use the stylus as a pen. So if I come across a passage that I really like, I know this might be difficult to see, but I can underline said passage. Obviously it would be better than that. Or I can circle things and I can write ha ha, because that's funny, isn't it? Ha ha. You can also highlight over like you can on the Kindle. That's just changed the page, which shows you sometimes it's not always as responsive, but if you hold and highlight, you can choose your annotation colour, change colours. That'll tell you that that passage means something to you. You can circle bits and draw pictures of willies and stuff, because I'm a typical man. I just felt like that it was going to add... Oh, you can also rub out as well. So my daughter always tells me off for doing that. I always draw pictures of willies because I'll never grow up. I feel like this is going to add just another dimension to my e-reading experience and hopefully stop me from buying more books. Another few things that I did like about the Kobo that my Kindle didn't do, or at least I didn't think that it did. I've not tried, but at least it wasn't obvious to me, was that I could link my library card to this, which I did yesterday on an app on here called Overdrive. Really straightforward. You go on Overdrive, you put in your library card details and it links your library to there. One of the issues I'm having is I'm registered at Chesterfield Library. It appears they have 0 ebooks in their catalogue and they largely focus on audiobooks. So I don't know if maybe I need to register to a different library to get library cards on there. I found it really, really easy to get books on here from BorrowBox. I literally downloaded the book, it came as an EPUB, and then I just put the EPUB onto Google Drive. It was straight on there. So I really, really enjoy the ease of use for this. I like the fact that I'm not getting sold things all the time. When I go onto the main page on my Kobo, literally the only things there are the books that I own. Whereas on the front of my Kindle, when I go on there, on my front page, Amazon are just trying to sell me the world rather than focusing on what I actually have. So I've got From My Library at the top, but then all the pages are just full of more temptation, trying to get me to buy more books. Another negative to having the Kobo is that you do lose Kindle Unlimited. So I think if you use Kindle Unlimited a lot, then that's going to be a big loss to you. However, if you can link your library to your Kobo, there's a very good chance that your library may have some of the books that you would have read on KU anyway. Now, one of the most frustrating things that I've found about this stupid case here, I'm always going to be honest with you, is that this stylus here sticks to the side of the Kobo. But when you've got the case on, it will stick. It sticks there so it doesn't kind of loose, but you can't shut it. It doesn't shut. I don't know if that's a design flaw or if I'm just being stupid, but the way that this should work, if I can get it out of here, is that you stick the stylus to the side of the Kobo so that you don't lose it, so that when you're reading, you know, the stylus is there on the side and you read along, and then when you want to write something, you pick it up and you write and you draw your willies and then you put it back on, and that's it. But the problem is, when you've got it in this case, which is specifically designed for this, there's just nowhere to put the stylus. And I've got ADHD, I lose everything. It's all right keeping it there, but what's the point in that if I can't shut it? Stupid. So then if I do shut it, you know, it's barely even stuck to it. It's like hanging off and wobbling. I don't know. If you have got one of these Kobo Libra Colors, just tell me if I'm being an idiot. So far, I would truly say it was worth the transition. At some point, I might do a more detailed video of this. I'm still going to keep my Kindle because I think my Kindle does feel, and I mean, it doesn't feel, it is quite a bit lighter and just more easy to kind of put in my pocket and things like that. So I'll probably still use this just for holiday trips. If I'm maybe sat in the car and doing school runs, this will just slip straight in my pocket. But the majority of my reading at home now is 100% going to be done on the Kobo Libra Color. And hopefully doing more e-reading might introduce me to more books, because I'm going to lean more towards using my library and using BorrowBox and things like that to try and get some books. Hopefully you've enjoyed this video. This is pretty much all I've got to say for today. Thank you so much for watching to this point. If you have watched to this point, as always, I love you the most. If you are new to this page, please hit the subscribe button. It really helps me out. And if you have enjoyed the video, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up. Again, it helps me out. It lets me know what kind of content you like and gives me ideas for future content as well. Thank you so much, and I will see you in the next one. Mwah!